Hello, hope everybody's doing well. And yeah, I was really sorry to hear the news about Tom Verlaine this week. I'm a huge television fan, big admirer of Verlaine's guitar playing and his songwriting. So that was very sad news indeed. And I will be doing a Tom Verlaine lesson, another television lesson at some point. I was actually planning anyway to look at another television track later this year. So I will be doing some kind of a tribute lesson. I don't tend to go in for the sort of immediate knee-jerk tribute lessons. I don't feel much like doing it this week, but that will happen at some point later in the year. Anyway, as for today's lesson, I'm going to keep things simple and I hope fun. You might be able to hear I'm a little bit under the weather this week. It's been a busy week. So what I thought I would do is look at another track from Raw Power. And Raw Power by Iggy and the Stooges, definitely one of my favourite records of all time. And I've looked at a number of tracks from this one already. I think I joked last time that I'd probably cover every single track on the album, and I'm actually not far off doing that now. I'm about halfway there, so I'm sure I'll complete the album at some point. But the track that I'm going to be looking at today is the title track, Raw Power, and it's simple to play, but there are a few interesting subtleties in the riffs, so let me play a bit of it for you, and then I will break everything down. So the Raw Power album came out in 1973 and it was recorded in London at what was then CBS Studios, which I think then became Whitfield Street Studios, which then closed down like a lot of London studios have done these days. I'd actually be quite hard pressed to say exactly why this is one of my favourite albums of all time. I mean, clearly it is an album that lives up to its title, and it's wild and it's noisy and it's totally all over the place at times. But beyond that, I think the quality of the songwriting is fantastic and the arrangements are great. And obviously James Williamson's guitar playing is fantastic. And it's also a really strange record, and perhaps that's what keeps me coming back to it. It's not your standard big rock or punk production, and there have been some really odd choices made in the instrumentation and in the balances between the sounds. And there was a whole saga about the mixes to this album, and it was initially mixed by David Bowie. And that was how I first heard it, I think, and that sounded great to me. But then Iggy himself remixed it at some point, and I've got a CD of those mixes. And at the time, it was apparently one of the loudest records ever mastered, and he mastered it sort of running completely into the red. And it sounds completely horrible, but in just the right kind of way. Anyway, let's get down to business, and I'll show you how one or two of the riffs in this tune are played. Let's start with that main riff then. And I love this riff, and it's so simple, and that's often the thing about great riffs, is they're not complicated. And that's the mysterious thing, I suppose. I mean, when you actually sit down and try and write a great riff, it's a very hard thing to do. But then you look at something like this, and there's not actually that much to it, but it's just perfectly formed. And we're in the key of C. It's all really based around power chord shapes. We're starting with this power chord here. It's a C power chord, a C5, so fret 8 on the low E and 10 on the A. And we're setting up kind of an 8-note rhythm. And the great thing about this are the accents that fall on beats 2 and 4. And what you're going to need to do here is just flatten down or roll your third finger over onto the higher string. So you're starting with just this 2-note power chord. And then if you flatten down your third finger, you can cover the D and the G strings as well. So you're getting that kind of sus sus4 sound just briefly. And you're doing that on beats 2 and 4, so it's where the drummer would play the snare drum. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then at the end of the riff we're just moving up 2 frets to a D5, and then down to the 6th fret. This is a B flat 5. A great riff. I suppose a more standard riff would have gone something like this. That's how it could have been, but it's nowhere near as cool. I think it's just having those accents in there and then that quick chord change at the end of the riff. That's what makes it. So make sure you're playing that with all downstrokes. You're going to need to stay quite relaxed just to play those fast downstrokes, but you do want to dig in. I mean, James Williamson's quite an aggressive guitar player, so relax but play fairly hard and you should come close to the kind of sound that he gets. Then we've got a second riff which goes something like this. So essentially we're playing this with power chords again. We're going down to an F5 down at the 1st fret, and then we're going to an A, and then down to a G. But what makes this interesting are the little single note connecting parts, and this is what I think is going on. We've got the F5, and then we've got these 2 connecting notes, so a G and a G sharp, so it's the 3rd fret and the 4th fret. And then we're doing the same thing off of the A chord before we hit the G5. So, and I did scrutinise live footage of James Williamson playing this. He seems to play those linking notes with his pinky, so squeezing in at the 3rd fret and then shifting up to the 4th fret, and then a similar kind of thing off of the A chord. So you could do it like that. You could go use fingers 3 and 4 there, that works too. Then we go to the G chord, and what I'm hearing on the record is this, kind of the G and the A note there. So you could do that with the power chord, and again use your pinky to get that extra note. If you can just kind of squeeze it in at the 5th fret, or you could just play the single notes on their own. And what Williamson seems to do in some live videos is he actually just plays this part. I'm not actually hearing that on the record, I don't think, but that would certainly work too. So you play the power chord and then you stretch up to this E note here at fret 7 on the A string. So you've got a few different options there with this part. So then we're back to the main riff. Then there's another riff coming later in the song. I don't quite know what to call these different parts of the song. It's really just a riff-based tune rather than a verse, chorus, bridge kind of a song, I think. But the next riff you hear, the guitar goes down to A flat or a G sharp. We got so that's quite straightforward. You just got that A flat, 2 bars on that, and then back to C, back to the main riff. that's about it as far as the main riffs are concerned. I'm just now going to talk about the lead guitar stuff at the end of the tune. And I don't think this is something that you can learn note for note. I don't think it's something you should want to learn note for note. With this kind of playing, it's more about just the spirit of it and the feeling. So listen to what Williamson is doing. I'll show you some of the ideas he's using, and then you can do it your own way. But he starts off with a riff that goes something like this. So he's using C minor pentatonic for a lot of this improvising stuff at the end of the tune. So starting off down here, you've got your C minor pentatonic in a kind of box shape. And he's just hammering on from 1 to 3 on the A string. And then you've got 1 on the D string. Then he's up into a pattern 1 C minor pentatonic, so up in the 8th position. So just playing some, I suppose they're kind of blues licks, but he's playing them in the James Williamson kind of a way, so it's quite kind of wild and messy. And you really just want to go for it. There are lots of bending notes in there, so good notes to bend in this position of the scale are the 10th fret on the G, the 11th fret on the B, and the high E. So and try and make it as wild and as messy as you can. So when you're bending a note, it's cool to have just some random open strings in there. So, or if you're bending on the top string, sometimes you can catch the B string as well, and they both ring together in this nice dissonant kind of a way. And at one point, I think he's working his way a bit higher up the neck. He uses these kind of almost unison bend type of sounds as well. So you're bending at 16 on the B and holding down 15 on the top string, and both notes become the same note. And again, you get that nice sort of dissonant sound. And move that shape around. Maybe some double stops. So 10th fret on the B and the G, just bending both of those strings. And I like to use my third finger for that, so just flattening down my third finger, just pulling down on both of those strings. You could use fingers 2 and 3 and pull or push those strings. So a few lead guitar ideas there for you. Just play around with those ideas. Do it your own way. The best thing to do, I think, is just to put the record on and play along to it and see what happens. Let me give you a run through of the gear that I'm using today. And James Williamson, most closely associated with Les Pauls, so that's what I'm using today. This is a 59 reissue Les Paul. I think he used Les Pauls on the recording of the album. I think I read somewhere that he used AC30 amps when he was recording the album. I don't know if he exclusively used AC30s or there were some other amps in the studio, but mostly I think it was AC30s. My AC30 is actually broken at the moment. It's kind of lighting up, but no sound is coming out. So if anyone's got any ideas what might be wrong, let me know, but I'm probably just going to have to take that into an amp tech and get that fixed at some point. So instead of the AC30, I'm using my Marshall today. It's been good to get my Marshall out. I haven't used it much lately. And this Marshall is a studio vintage Marshall. So it's a plexi style Marshall, but it's lower wattage. It's designed for studio use and home use. It's still pretty loud, but it's certainly not as loud as a full-blown 100-watt Marshall plexi. And I'm doing the classic thing that you can do with Marshall plexis, where you bridge the two channels together with a little patch lead. And a Marshall Plexi's got a normal channel and then a high treble channel. The normal channel is a bit cleaner, it's a little bit dull sounding, and then the high treble channel can be a little bit over the top. It's more distortion, but it can be a little bit harsh and grating, and by blending the two together you can get the best of both worlds. So that's where the overdrive is coming from. I did just use one pedal as well, so when I did the lead guitar stuff I stomped on and Analog Man Beano Boost, which is a Rangemaster style treble booster. So just the guitar into the Marshall sounds like this. And then with the Beano Boost. That's it for today. If you would like tab for this one, I've written out the basic riffs, and that's going to be up on my Patreon page. If you want more Iggy, more Stooges, I've done plenty of other videos on his music. As I say, I've done, I think, 3 other videos on tracks from Raw Power. I've done a video on my favourite Ron Ashton riffs, and I've done 1 or 2 others as well. So if you go to my channel homepage and do a search, you should be able to find some of those. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.